Julia, how are you doing today?
Great. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so excited for us to get to record this episode together. I want to thank you for coming on.
Of course. Thank you for having me. I know it's different than all the other guests you had on. Everybody
No,
was
it's
different.
awesome. It's awesome. I know that there's someone else too that I'm probably going to have it this way as well, because they also live far away and stuff. So
Yeah.
you get to be the first like
Yay.
intro to that format, especially because it's cool. It's cool to have it in different formats so that people can get
100%. Yeah.
to.
You
No,
do
but
not
yeah,
want
and
that.
you were one of the first people I thought about like having on to the podcast, just
Aw.
because we've known each other for a bit. Like
Yeah.
even when we were kids, we went on like the summer vacation together. Like we just were always like we were at the same church. And
Yeah.
then when we got older, we went to Nyack
Yeah.
together.
Like we like reconnected like out of nowhere, which is
It
very
really
cool.
was out of the blue. Like
Yeah.
I think I was like 19, 20 years old.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so. I think I was 18, 19, something
Yeah.
like that. Yeah.
It was like my second year there. And we had like a little mini Brazilian jersey squad going
Yes.
together
Yeah.
to Nyack,
Yeah.
which was so funny
Very
because like
fun.
we all grew up like around each other, but we didn't like grow up always together. But it was nice
Yeah.
that we got to
I think it was like a really cool dynamic because it literally was like that. It was like we had like kind of like the superficial friendship. We all knew of each other. We had a very big connection like as kids. And then as we grew up, we kind of stopped having that, I guess, friendship connection. And once we got into college, we
Mhm.
ended up all, being very, very close and having like a little click. So I
Yeah.
think that's very, very cool.
And it was really awesome too because like all of our parents had known each other, like they all like had kind of like seen
Yeah.
each other. And then when we all started reconnecting, it was like living that again.
Yeah, yeah.
And
It's
I
very
just
crazy.
remember like how much you influenced like my life because
Oh,
I'm so serious. I've always like admired you so much. Like even though you were like younger than me,
yeah.
you had this boldness that you just always carried yourself with, that it was just always so like interesting to see because I was like, wow, like I want to be bold, I want to be confident. And you were just always that. You always had like the right thing to say. You always had like carried yourself with such grace. So when I was thinking about like women that I admire, women that I would love to talk to, like you were one of the first people I thought of, and I was like, I would love to have Julia on for an episode.
Oh,
You know,
that's so sweet. I think it's so funny because I didn't think of myself in that way. And I look back and people would always say that about me, and I'm like, I don't see it, but whatever. I'm just gonna keep doing what I do and whatever. But I think that I I don't know. I guess I don't know why I didn't see myself like that, but you're not the first person to tell me that. And I'm like, I don't know. I felt like, I've transitioned like from then to now. Um, I don't know, I guess like into I kind of want to say a better person because even though I think I may have been, bold and whatever back then, um I think that God really taught me how to like not just be because sometimes I think that people get confused with like boldness and with like I don't even know the word, like I guess being outspoken.
yeah.
I was just very outspoken. I always had, my opinions and I was always like willing to help people. But God has really allowed me to step into boldness within these past like seasons that I've been living. So I think it's very funny because like people would always say, "Oh, you're always so bold, blah, blah," but I did not see myself as that at all until recently. Until I was like, yeah, now like I feel like God has been, really using me in boldness and everything. So, but I really appreciate that. That's so sweet. I like, and for you, like I don't know, like why you didn't think of yourself as bold because I thought that you were like
Oh,
one,
I think sometimes it's easier for other people to recognize stuff in
100%.
us. Like we don't sometimes have a harder time. Oops, sorry. We sometimes have a harder time seeing those qualities. And it wasn't ever like, it never felt like an act. It always felt like you were just being you. And that's why like I just admired that because I was like, I don't feel like she's putting on a persona. Julia's being Julia. If you had something to say, you were gonna say it. You
Yeah.
would, and you would always say it in such a way that people could receive it. And so then I just always admired that. I was like, I really, really, really like that.
Yeah.
And so like I wanted to see like how has life changed from then to now? Like you kind of touched it a little bit, you know,
Mhm.
you went through a season where, you know, God's been molding your character and forming you into this woman that you are today. And so like tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think that like the biggest thing to change was obviously, in 2020 I got married, and then shortly after, I think like not even a month after I got married, me and Lucas, my husband, just felt really called to come to Florida. So we came and moved here. Everything was literally like aligned by God. But I think that once I got here, um, God really just started like shifting things in my life in general. In the way that I thought about things, my opinion about things, the way that I would talk to other people and interact with other people and stuff like that. I think that God, like I tell Lucas, and we talk about it all the time, and I'm like, I look back at how I was, and not that I'm like ashamed of the way that I carried myself, but I'm so grateful for how God has transformed me in the sense that of how I carry myself now. Because I think that before I was very like you said, I was very like speak my mind and whatever. And I, even though I'm so, so happy that you had the experience with me, that, you think that I would say things and people would like receive it really well. Unfortunately, like I think that for a lot of people, especially in the time that I was leading youth, I think that it wasn't that way, unfortunately. I was young, and I was very, very black and white about a lot of things that maybe weren't black and white. Um, in like leading, like leadership styles and conversation, like more socially,
Mm.
And I I remember like moving here and looking back and kind of being like so ashamed of sometimes the way that I would say things, the way that I would carry myself. And I asked God, you know, literally the entire like pandemic like time, like Jesus, change my heart. Like
Wow.
help me to be a better person to other people. Help me learn to speak to other people. Help me be more wise in my words, more wise in my thoughts. Um, and I think that honestly, like it was probably the toughest time like that, like for me, like moving here to, the pandemic hitting, and I had to stay home for several months, kind of just like alone. Like Lucas was working and I would be at home, and, all that, as everybody's reality was basically, right? The difference is that, I didn't have any friends here. So it's like I had zero type of like social interaction. And it was one of the toughest times of my life. But at the same time, I think that it was so necessary, because it was in that time that I literally would just speak to like my husband and God.
Mm.
And it was in that time that I think that God really, really started to shift my heart and change the way that I spoke, the way that I acted, the way that my character was, into something better, And I think that, he's molding me every single day, because, we are not perfect.
Work in progress.
Yes, as we all are. Like none of us are perfect. And I think that we oftentimes fail. And but now I think that God has given me a discernment of like knowing, hey, you messed up when you did that. You messed up when you said that. You messed up when, maybe you thought that. And back then, I think that I didn't really have that. I was kind of like, I'm going to say what I want. I'm going to say my opinion. If you want it, take it. If not, then oh well. You know what I mean? Which is not a great mentality to have in certain points. So God has really, like, I think internally changed a lot. And I always told God, I was like, God, I know the calling that you have for me. I know the things that you have instilled, the promises that you have over me, but I cannot do the calling that you have placed over me if you don't change this in my heart.
Mm. No,
So
you submitted it to God, like fully.
exactly. So
Yeah.
I think that after I started allowing God to mold me, after I started allowing him to change the things that were the hardest things for me to change, was when I started, feeling myself being more not only connected to God, but, more in tune with the spirit, in tune with the calling that he has for me. So yeah, so it's been a ride. But it's been good. It's been so good.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, now we've been here for like 3 years.
Mhm.
Had one baby, one on the way. So that's very, very exciting. I had my first baby boy in 2021, and I'm gonna have my baby girl in August. So yeah, our little family.
Exciting.
And yeah, I think that like even that, like there could be like I could just go on and on about like what God has taught me in the season of motherhood, but like that's like I think a whole other episode, girl, because it's like it's crazy, because I think that um God has just like completely like took me from, so I always wanted to be a mom. I felt like I always had like that a little bit of like that mothering spirit,
Yeah.
but it's so different. It's so different. And it's something that I think that you learn every single day, and God teaches you every single day. So it's like literally something that God is working literally every single day through my life, being a mom, being a wife. But yeah, so now we're here. We are, active members of our church. I could never not be. Love serving. So right now me and Lucas are one of the youth leaders here at our church. So we work alongside two other couples, which is very, very great. They're very awesome, and I'm so blessed that God put them in my life. And yeah, so now it's just we're going day by day.
That's so awesome. I think it's something that like when you were speaking, I remember sometimes some of the youth ask me like, what's it like getting older? I'm like, geez, guys, you're making me feel like I'm ancient when you ask me that question.
Oh,
They're like, but what's it like? Like how is like 17 different than 27? And you kind of touched the point really good where it's like learning how to depend more on God now. I feel like I'm way more dependent on him now and also more confident in my identity in him than when I
100.
was younger. Like now I'm like, things don't work out. I'm like, okay, I guess it wasn't from God. It's not
Yeah.
God's timing. It's fine. Like it's okay. But then if things do work out, I'm like, well, there you go. It comes from God. And then
Yeah.
it's like as you get like when you're younger, you think you know everything. But then as you get older, you realize how dependent you are on God.
Uh-huh.
And you
100.
start to notice your toxic traits. You start to notice all these
Like
things.
all the red flags.
And you're like, oh man, maybe I'm the problem in this situation where I
Yeah.
thought that I had like toda razón, like maybe that was me. So I think it's a beautiful thing. Like, obviously we're still young. We're still young.
Yes.
We still have a lot of years left.
Well, some people don't think so. We are young.
Like relax. We're literally still in our 20s. But it's like I feel like the older side of 20, it's nice of coming into who you are. And I can't wait to see in the next like 10 years how much we continue to grow in that, in God's timing,
Yeah.
his perfection. There is one story that is my favorite story of us, like in our friendship phase, like when we were like seeing each other every day because of school. Like sometimes we would go to Wendy's. So I remember just always like being around you and Lucas, and you guys were like my OTP. Like, I'm so serious.
Oh my gosh, I haven't heard that in like forever.
I'm like making sure I'm saying it right. I was like, you guys were literally
Yeah.
like my perfect match. I loved you guys. I remember like I would be sitting there in the car and I would watch you guys like interacting, and you guys were like best friends, and hearing your story of how you guys started dating. And I was just like, oh my gosh, they're everything I want and more. Like I love this relationship because even though you guys weren't married, you guys were already serving together, and you guys were already like aligned in ministry
Yes.
and doing what God called you guys to do. And it was so like from an outside perspective, it was so like inspiring. I think like every Christian woman thinks about her Christian husband or her Christian boyfriend and how she
Yeah.
wants him to be, how she wants him to treat not only you, but like the people around you. And so like I just remember I was convinced from day one that I was like, yeah, no, they're gonna get married. Like this is it. Like day one, like when I started becoming friends with you guys, I was like, they're gonna get married. This is it. Like they're like, there's no doubt in my mind. There was other people in our group that I was like, nah, I don't know about this one. I don't know. But then you guys, I was like, nah, like this is God putting this couple together. So imagine my surprise one day when we're on the train and you said something that just, I think it just like blew me out of the water because
Yeah.
it was good for me too. I'll be honest with you, but you blew me out of the water. I don't know if you want to tell it from your perspective.
No, you can tell it. Go ahead. And I can kind of touch in here and there.
We were sitting there, and I think Jeremy was with us, right? My brother.
I think so.
I think so too. Jeremy and Lucas, and I think it was Raph, were sitting away from us. They were like having,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, they were having their little boys moment over there, just like talking to each other. And you
Yeah.
and I were
On
just
like
sitting there,
the 9 p.m. like path back to New Jersey.
and we were exhausted. I remember like it was a full day, and they were still being loud, and we just looked at each other, and you're like, I think I'm gonna break up with him. I went, huh? I remember just being in shock. I was like, what? And you're like, yeah, I need him to grow up. He's not growing up. And I remember just like, I was like, no, no. But then I like let you kind of like say your reasons. Like you kind of like talked it out because I knew
Yeah.
like I could feel in that moment there was just like a lot of pressure on you guys. And given like the circumstances with everything you guys were going through, like it made sense that there was just a lot of pressure and that it was seeping into your relationship. But then like hearing you talk it out and you're like, but this and this and this and this and I was just sitting there and I remember I just turned to you and I said, Julia, don't do it. I was like, don't do it. And you're like, what? And I was like, you think it's fun out here being a single woman who doesn't know who her husband is? I was like, you got lucky. You got it on the first shot.
Yeah.
I was like, I was like, you really want to come back out here to this life of singleness? I was like, it's rough out here. And we started cracking. I was like, it's rough out here. We have no options. What are you doing? And then you started laughing. And then I was like, and then we kind of like, after laughing about it a little bit, like I think we said we were going to start praying about it type of thing. Like I was going to be praying for you, whatever choice. I even said like something like whatever God has for you in God's timing, it'll happen.
Yeah.
I was like, like, don't give up. I was like, because there's no doubt in my mind that that's your husband, but you need to like basically like trust God.
Yeah.
And I remember the reason why it was so inspiring to me, like even like your honesty in that moment was so like refreshing, because a lot of time people like to pretend that every relationship's like perfect. And I kept like not having that example, And so like I kept going like, if they can't make it work, like then there we go. Like I'm doomed, But then hearing you be so honest about that moment of like, should we or shouldn't we?
Mm-hmm.
I think it was such a good moment for like, I learned from it of trusting God's timing.
Yeah.
And trusting that God was in control of everything and seeing you fully submit your relationship to him. Like that's what you did. Like you fully submitted to God in that season. So I don't know if you want to add on there.
Yeah. I think that it was very rough because I think at that point we were already dating for like, I think almost 4 years.
Yeah. It was a while.
And that's a pretty long time. People do date for longer, which awesome. But it was kind of like I was there and I was like, what's next? You know what I mean? We were, like you said, we were already doing ministry together. We had already spent from like 16 to what, like actually I think it was 15. Yeah, from like 15 to 19 together. And I remember that what sparked that conversation, he had like a while, I think maybe not a while, but like a few months before we were talking about it, and he kind of said that he was not ready. He was like, I'm not ready for this. I never thought of getting married, super young. And I did. And I was like, crap, you know what I mean? Like, is this gonna be like a deal breaker? You know what I mean? And I remember there was other things that I think that we had to get right in our relationship. I remember that I was even telling you, I was like, I just feel like he has to grow up a little bit. I feel like, he has to kind of make up his mind in certain areas of what he wants and blah, blah, blah. And it was just a lot of things that I felt were kind of, what's it called? Like they kept piling up.
Yeah.
I had never spoken about that to anybody because I feel like whenever it came to mine and Lucas's relationship, when I asked for anybody else's opinion, it was always the same thing. It was always like, no, you can't break up. No, you can't break up, because we started dating so young that when we when obviously started growing up, started meeting new people, everybody just met us together.
Yeah.
Like everybody was, oh, this is Julia, this is Lucas, they're dating, they're together, and that's it. You know what I mean? So a majority of the friendships that we had, it was like they've always just known us as Julia and Lucas, Lucas and Julia, and that was it, Um, even like our professors in college, like it was to that extent. So I felt like if I had said that to anybody else, it would kind of be like, oh no, you can't, like that's out of the question, like don't even think about it. Whereas with you, you kind of, I remember that you told me like you should just talk to him about it. And I was like, I don't think I can. Like I remember that
Yeah.
was something that I was like, I don't know how he would take it. Like I don't want to start an argument. I'm just like so tired. I was so exhausted, like emotionally and kind of mentally, that I was like, I don't want to start that conversation. At the time, I literally felt like it was better to just break up and give no type of
Yeah.
explanation than to like explain A, B, C, D. And I remember that you told me, you're like, maybe you should just talk to him and see, because and I remember you said, like, I know for a fact that you're going to marry him, but if you don't have that like certainty, then it's not worth it. And I
Yeah,
remember
that
I
was
was
hard.
like,
When I thought you were OTP, you were OTP. But I was like, okay, but you needed to know that yourself.
I was like, ugh, Brittany's right. So I remember that. I think honestly, that same day, I remember that I dropped you guys off.
Hmm.
And after I dropped you guys off, we were talking in the car, and I kind of laid out to him my, expectations and everything. And he, thank God, my husband at the time, boyfriend, but he's always been so like wise. There's literally no other word that I can say. But he understood and he received it very, very well. And I think at that point we kind of just started working on those little issues that we had to work through, and in time everything started falling into place. I did give him an ultimatum. I did say, all right, but hopefully by the end of, next year, I have a ring on my finger, because like, we do need to
Yeah.
follow the word and get married and everything. And I just thought that was the next step for us regardless. But thank God that in that year and a half, maybe like before we got engaged, God really worked a lot in our relationship.
Mm.
And then after we got engaged, he worked even more in our relationship. And I think that, like you said, it was just being able to like have patience and be like, all right, like it's going to happen in God's timing, but there's certain things that needed to happen, certain things that needed to be fixed, certain things that needed to be, shaped before that next step. So,
Right.
and I think that if we would have taken that next step too early, just because we wanted to, it would not have worked out. I think it
Mm.
would have honestly ended up like exploding and not being very good. But because I think we spoke about it, we prayed a lot, and we asked God to lead us, and we asked God to guide us, that it ended up working out for the best. And now here we are.
It did. And it's beautiful what you said. It was like knowing that it had to be in God's timing. I
Yeah.
think it's like good that you set a boundary and you like established like what you wanted and you communicated it. And you knew that if this like was your husband, that he was gonna step up for it. And
Mm-hmm.
he did. He stood up. Like he
Yeah.
learned how to basically what do you call it? He was basically learning how to be your husband. I know that sounds like silly, but it's true. Like it's we talk a lot, like we did an episode called The Esther, and we talk a lot about positioning yourself in the role you want.
Yeah.
So it's like already demonstrating certain actions and showing God, like, I'm ready for this next step whenever you're ready to bless me.
100%.
Whenever you're ready to promote me, I've already aced this A, B, C, D, E. Like I already started the process of doing that. And so I think like when you do your part, God always shows up and does his part.
100%.
God
Yes.
always does. And I even told you at the beginning, like when we first got on the call, like your testimony in that moment to me has been such like confirmation that God's timing is always best, even with like Levi and now it's Zoe, right?
Zoe.
And Zoe, like that's all confirmation that when you're patient in God, he honors that patience.
Yeah.
He gives you the desires of your heart. he fulfills dreams and promises. And like Levi and Zoe, they're going to be like living proof of your patience,
Yeah.
you know? And that's beautiful.
Proof of my patience and proof that our timing is not God's, because they were in shorter terms, these babies are planned by God, period. Because yeah,
It's perfect timing.
Explanation. Yeah.
And it's perfect timing if it's God's timing.
Yeah.
There's one, like, because I always like to bring kind of a Bible story that I think about whenever thinking of the topics. And I thought of Hannah.
Mm-hmm.
And Hannah in the Bible, like, she was someone who, it's gonna end in 10 minutes, so we're okay. Hannah in the Bible, like, she understood what it was to do like what you did, which is to be bold and ask God for what you want and be like clear to ask what you want, but to wait on his timing.
Yeah.
Because she was very clear. She said, God, I want a son. Like,
Yeah.
I want a kid. This is what I want. Search my heart. You know the desires in my heart.
Yeah.
You see it. And I know that you are a God that can basically, like, I'm paraphrasing, but I know that you're the God of the impossible. Like, I know that you can make it happen.
Yes.
This is what I want. And God, I will give it back to you. I will dedicate this child to you.
Exactly.
And I feel like that's what we need to do in our life, where it's like we sometimes really want things, but we're not willing to do the second part, which is to dedicate that thing back to God. And it's hard, like relationships, family, that's sacred. And sometimes you want to keep it to yourself because you want to protect it. And that's natural. But your family, from like everything that I see, like you and Lucas, your relationship, how you bless other youth, dedicating that relationship back to God, it's the best thing you can do, because he's going to take care of you guys and you're blessing so many people in the process.
Yeah.
And touching so many people. And so it's like Hannah really stuck out to me. And when it comes to that, like, women, if you want something, don't be afraid to ask God. Don't be afraid, be intentional with your purpose, with your words. Like, God, this is what I want. Like, I know that you are a God of like details. This is what I want. Like, I want a husband that I'm going to serve with. I want a husband that's going to run this race with me. Be intentional, and God, we will dedicate our relationship back to you.
Yeah. I think that it's so crazy because, like, I think that a lot of times, especially women, we're scared to put everything at God's feet and be like, God, this is what I want. This is my desire. And completely submit it to God, because we're scared of hearing no. Right.
Yeah.
I'm like that. I hate when God is like, no, or like, not yet. But I know that even though I might not like that, no, I might not enjoy that, like, not yet, I know that it's for the best. But we, like you said, we need to do that. We need to go to the feet of God and be like, God, this is my desire. And if it's in accordance with your will, please make it happen in your timing. And I remember that ever since I was young, I always asked God, one of my main prayers was like, oh, I want my first boyfriend to be my husband. And I've always said that. And people look at me and be like, why? My mom would ask me, she'd be like, why? You don't want to like date around a little bit, like explore? I'm like, no, like, I don't want that.
Not really.
No, I was like, I really did want like my first boyfriend, like my first serious boyfriend, to be my husband. I didn't want that whole like, oh, date, break up. But there's nothing wrong with it. But it's not something that, my son is knocking on the door. And I think it's just so funny how God literally like did that. He was like, okay. And it was with somebody that I would not have imagined, like somebody that I already had years worth of friendship with. But God literally will do that. So it's like, if you're in this season of like, oh, like, God, like, give me, this is my desire, like, please, like, help me out here, know that God can and will fulfill the desires of your heart.
Amen.
But the key is like what I said before, is if it's in accordance with his will.
Yep.
Because God does not do anything in mediocrity, right? God wants the best for his daughters. God wants the best for his sons, and he will give you the best. So it's like, if you're at a point that you're putting your life at the feet of God, go ahead and tell him your desires, but know that God will always, always surpass them. So
True. It's so true, dude. Like literally I'm like listening to you talk and I'm hearing you, and it's something that like my life has not turned out at all how I thought it would, but it's so much more beautiful than I could have imagined.
yeah,
It's like honestly amazing, and that's why I've talked a little bit about like anxiety and depression and all those things, but submitting it to the foot of Jesus and just saying, God, like, you know me,
yeah,
you know my limitations, and you know the desires in my heart. I'm
exactly.
going to be intentional with my prayers, but God, in your timing,
Yeah,
and give me patience to like, what's it called, to give me patience to survive the waiting, basically. Give
yeah,
me
yeah,
patience to keep serving you faithfully in the waiting, and knowing that you're taking care of all the details, everything that needs to work out. Because it was beautiful what you said. Like, if it had happened at the wrong time, you guys wouldn't have been ready.
yeah,
And it's true. Sometimes we ruin things because we're not ready.
yeah,
And it's
exactly.
beautiful to know that God's timing above everything, it just everything starts falling into place,
Yeah.
you know?
Exactly. It's hard.
Yeah.
Like, it's like nobody's gonna sit here and be like, oh yeah, the waiting period is easy.
So fun.
It's not. It is so hard. But once you look back and you're like, that's why God made me wait. That's why God was teaching me patience. So I think that that's so, so important to keep in mind.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, you're blessing my life so much right now. You have no idea.
Amen. Amen.
Huh?
Same right here.
Oh, Tiffany said same right here. No,
Love that.
it's beautiful. It's beautiful that like to have that example. Like, see, I waited and God fulfilled way more than I imagined.
Exactly.
And differently. And it looks different than how I thought it would look. And it feels different, but it's peaceful because it comes from God.
Exactly. Yeah.
Ooh.
That's the biggest thing. I think that in no time of me being in that waiting period, and no matter the season that I've ever gone through, I've never, obviously, like, we're human, so we worry and we have a little bit of anxiety and whatever, but
Yeah.
there's always this peace that is over us when you are waiting because it's God's time. And I think that if you are in that waiting period and you're like, I'm just not feeling peace, ask God, like, God, in this time that you are asking me to wait, that you are asking me to be patient, please cover me with your peace that surpasses all understanding, because he will give you that. He will cover you with a peace that you're like, I'm in the waiting and it is hard and I have no idea what's next and when this next step is to come, but I am in peace because I know that God is here with me. God is here walking through this waiting time with me.
And he's taking care of it all.
Exactly.
Hannah got her son eventually. And not only did she get one son, because she was faithful back to God, then she ended up with 5 more. Like it really is. When you're faithful to God, God's faithful to you. And he
Exactly.
honors our prayers and he honors our desires, all accordance to his will. And then that son that she dedicated ended up being a great prophet that raised up King David, who comes
Amen.
through the lineage of Jesus.
Yeah.
It's
And it's like the word of God says, right? Like the Bible says, like, if you draw close to me, I will draw close to you. So that's literally what it is. It's like what we were talking about, being at the feet of Jesus, drawing close to him and allowing him to work in your life, independent of, like, regardless of the season that you're going through, regardless if it's a tough season, if it's a happy season, if it's a season that everything is just going smoothly. You know what I mean? It's just being there and being, God, I will continue to draw close to you so that you can continue to draw close to me.
Oh my gosh, I love that. You have no idea. Just drawing close to him because he knows exactly what we need the moment that we need it. And he always provides. Like now, that's the one thing I've learned. Even in my lowest moments, I've seen how God's provision has been over it.
Yeah.
And God's just beautiful. It's just it. Like sometimes people are like, oh, Brittany, like you've gotten really cheesy, like, and I was like, I'm not trying to be. It's just like, really, I feel like I'm living my first love with God. Like,
that's awesome.
And it's so like beautiful where I'm like, I'm just like in love. I just want to be with, like, talking about God 24/7. I just want to be, I'm just at peace with everything that he's doing. Even like right now, like I'm going through a really hard situation right now, but there's still this peace that accompanies it, that even when my anxiety is roaring, I know that God's in control, and it just brings this like this evenness in it that I've never experienced.
Like a stillness. Yeah.
it's like I've never experienced this type of peace. Like I always heard people talk about it, but this is the first time I'm experiencing it.
Yeah.
It's really nice. So before we go, Julia, any final thoughts on the topic, how God has perfected this and how he's still perfecting it in you?
Yeah, honestly, I think that we said a very, very good bunch. But yeah, just remember that everybody will go through a season of waiting. Everybody will go through a season that you have to be super patient, and just be waiting on God and be waiting for him to direct you. But even in that season of waiting, trust that God is with you, trust that he is working, trust that he knows the desires of your hearts more than anybody else, sometimes even more than ourselves. And nothing is ever, ever out of his control. Because sometimes in that waiting time, we always think like, oh my gosh, like who's writing this story? And
Right now.
Yeah, it's like, where is God? Like, why am I here for so long? And be encouraged that he's there with you. And if he is making you wait, then there is something inside of you that he is trying to mold, something that needs to occur within you for him to give you that desire and for him to do his will over your life. So don't be discouraged by the waiting time, but be encouraged, because if you are waiting, it's because God is instilling something in you, and the outcome will be so much bigger than you could expect.
That's beautiful, Drew. That's beautiful, 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 beautiful. And she's right, guys. Like in a season of waiting, it's easy to get discouraged. It's easy to forget that God's hand is over your life. But we are women of faith. We don't live by our sight. We don't live by our feelings or emotions. We live by what the Bible says is true and by God's promises. The Bible says that God is not a man who lies or changes his mind. So if he said it's going to happen, it's going to happen. If he's going to open the doors, he's going to open the doors. If he closes it, there's no force you can make. It's closed.
Yeah.
And so during this season, whoever it is there, maybe you're waiting for a response for a college or a job, a relationship, kids, whatever it is you're waiting for, God is in control of the situation.
Amen.
And if you need him to be present with you, draw near to him and he'll draw near to you.
Yeah.
And that's basically it. Like, I just want to thank you so much, Ju, for coming on with me.
Of course.
It's such an honor to have you. And
it's an honor I told you before, it's an honor to be called to be here.
No, you always vary, me and my English is great. You've always been such a blessing in my life. And I know that God is going to use you in such tremendous ways. And I would love to have you on again when we talk about motherhood, because I have no experience on motherhood and I would love to have your experience. So I just love you a lot. And I hope that God continues to use you as much as he has.
Amen. I love you too. And I'm so glad that we were able to have this little chat, and hopefully it blesses other lives too.
I know it will. I know it's going to be a blessing.
And hopefully next time it can be in person.
Yes. That way you can see the set here.
Yes, 100%.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much. Beijos, give a kiss to Lucas and to the baby and the future baby.
I will, 100%. Give a big hug and kiss everybody there too.
We'll do. I'll let them know. Bye.
Bye.